Hi there, and welcome back to Sonic Unleashed. And in this part we're in Chun-Nan, so yeah, looks like we have another night level to deal with. And no prizes for guessing what continent or country Chun-Nan is based off. It's obviously China. And out of all like the themes and continents in this game, it's not my absolute favourite, or even up there, but it's still pretty good. I do like the whole aesthetics with the reds and the golds. It's just, yeah, it's just a good theme. That, and I like Chinese culture and design in general. You know, the patterns, the looks, the colours. Yeah, it really looks vibrant and decorative as well. That, and it looks like original compared to like the Western culture or the Western designs that I'm used to. And again, just talk to the people around the town, and you should find these sacred shrines fairly easy. And again, I mentioned the design and architecture. The temple itself is actually a good example. It's got a nice use of reds and golds. It's also got like the patterns on the walls. So yeah, a really fancy and cool looking design. You know, what's kind of funny is that dragons are mentioned in this game, but we don't actually see a dragon. And so we begin the first Chun-Nan night level. And there'll be about 3 of them in the PS2 version. And in terms of difficulty, this is when it sort of jumps up a notch. Because I'll tell you this now, when I was replaying this game, this level was the first time I actually died. So, yeah. And it was on a platforming section you'll see shortly. And that's something you'll notice more in the PS2 version. The fact that the levels are just, in general, a lot more platformy. Which can be a good thing, because it requires you to do some more platforming. But it can also be a bad thing, because it requires you to do more platforming. And I say that as a fan of platformers. It's just the jumping mechanics as the werehog aren't all there, really. Now, to talk about the level theme of this continent, it is clearly based off China. And I suppose, like other themes in this game, it seems mostly Chinese. Where, I mentioned before in Alaska, it seems to be a combination of Aboriginal North Americans and the Norwegians. This one, yeah, it definitely feels just Chinese. And in fact, the name of the theme itself, Chun-Nan, is probably based off a real region in China called Hunan. So that's sort of a big, clear, obvious clue. And something you might notice with these little fights here is the appearance of these red nightmares, called deep nightmares, I believe. And yeah, they're essentially just a harder version of the previous nightmares. So, in a typical fighting game style, they've just recoloured an old enemy to give us the impression that we're fighting a new one. But hey, at least these red nightmares appear in the Chun-Nan level, so I guess they're trying to fit in with the whole Chinese theme. And I say that because the colour red is actually considered really lucky in China. It's a sign of integrity. And in like ancient old times, I guess, it was believed the colour red could also exorcise ghosts. And speaking of the dead in Chinese culture, there is this interesting tradition I found out about during the Chinese New Year, where they burn fake money. And the idea is they're sort of buying a better afterlife for their ancestors. And not just like money, you might also see them burning valuable items like DVD players and clothes, for example. And it's quite an interesting view of the afterlife. And it's just I guess you could argue it's a more ancient view. And what I mean by that is it's a lot more literal. Of course, with like different beliefs, you might think it's odd that money, something physical, could affect your afterlife. Yeah, a lot more people seem to prefer the belief that you'll be rewarded no matter what. Like money wouldn't even come into it. But yeah, the idea that you can send money to the other world to buy a better afterlife for your ancestors, it's actually so It's kind of weird, but in a strange way it makes sense. I guess you could argue it's like humanity trying to make sense of the unknown by associating it with something we can conceive of, like money. And as you can see from this level, an element which becomes more prolific is the idea of platforming over water. And yeah, needless to say, if you fall in, you die instantly. And I'm not really sure how I feel about that, because in other games, falling into water wasn't necessarily an instant death. Particularly with the Werehog, you might think he could actually have a swimming ability. You know, something he can't do as Sonic, and that would make him a bit more different and interesting. But I say that, if the Werehog could swim, it would probably give us some water levels as well. So maybe it's for the best that he can't swim. And besides, anyone who follows the Sonic the Hedgehog series knows that in the next game, we do get some Chinese themed water levels. So in that game, the idea was done, and it was done well. And I do plan on playing Sonic Colors eventually. It's on my to-do list. And you know, while I'm on the subject of China, something I'll bring up which kind of irritates me a bit is the remake of the Karate Kid. Not the movie itself, but the fact that it's called Karate Kid when it's set in China. And karate is Japanese and Kung Fu is Chinese. So really the film should be called The Kung Fu Kid. But of course, people have actually heard of the Karate Kid. If they called it the Kung Fu Kid, I guess most people would have thought it was a rip-off or a fake film. And I haven't actually seen the new Karate Kid. Not that I have anything against it, I just haven't got round to it. Although I will say Jackie Chan as the mentor is actually a pretty good decision. He's a well-known, likeable guy who's world famous for his martial arts. The most obvious piece of casting in history, I suppose. And I have actually heard a lot of good about the movie from friends and reviews. Although saying that, I have this one particular friend who's a huge fan of the original, and he sort of jokes that he doesn't even acknowledge its existence. I'm like, have you seen the remake? And he goes, what remake? Although to be fair, Karate Kid 3 and the next Karate Kid were pretty much remakes in a sense. Anyway, because they told the same story again, except slightly different. So, I guess in that sense, the new Karate Kid is pretty much like the other sequels. And you can see now we're approaching the end of the level here, and I do like the theme of this area that's set indoors. These levels, they're all set outside, so it's a shame we didn't see more of that. And actually a level set inside like a Chinese palace would have looked really good actually. But before I end this video, I'm just going to point out the fact that I've earned a new skill from gaining experience, the beat down technique. And it's a fairly useful move. You just pick up enemies, slam them against the floor, and you make little earthquakes which damage other enemies. So yeah, fairly useful. But anyway, the thing is with Chinese levels is they're much like Chinese food. After completing one, you soon want another one straight after. So please join me again in the next part where we'll be finishing off Chun-Nan Night. Thanks for watching.